You were born somewhere between 1951 and 1966. You worked, you paid in every single paycheck for decades. And right now there is money sitting with your name on it that nobody is going to hand over unless you ask for it the exact right way. I'll tell you straight. Most people in your age group are walking away from thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, and it isn't fraud, it isn't a loophole. It's benefits you already earned and paid for. This was not buried by accident. Stay with me to the end, because I'm going to lay down a single line hidden inside the Social Security claiming rules. People who know it call it the 6-month rule, and it can put a lump sum check in your hand before this year is out. It works whether you already filed or haven't touched a thing. I spent years sitting on the other side of that desk. I watched men and women your age sign forms they didn't understand and walk out having quietly given up thousands because the person across from them was not allowed to say what I'm about to say to you. So let me open the ledger. Let me show you what I saw. Here's the first piece of evidence, and it's the one that made me start writing things down at night. When I first learned the trade, I believed what everybody believes, that Social Security is Social Security, a fixed number, a check the government mails you when you turn a certain age. That's what my own father believed. He took his the first month he was eligible at 62 because a fellow at the plant told him to grab it before it disappeared. That single decision cost my father somewhere around $90,000 over his lifetime. I didn't understand that until years later when I finally read the schedule myself. Here's what almost nobody explains to you. The month you first claim is not a formality. It is a permanent multiplier stamped on every check for the rest of your life and for your spouse after you're gone. Claim early, and that multiplier is small forever. Wait, and it climbs faster than most banks will ever pay you. Let me give you the real numbers, because vague talk helps nobody. For people born in your window, your full retirement age is somewhere between 66 and 67, depending on your exact birth year. That's the age the government calls your baseline, where you get 100% of what you earned. But here's the part they don't put on a billboard. For every single year you wait past that full retirement age, up to age 70, your benefit grows by 8%. Not 8% once, 8% added. Every year, guaranteed, backed by the federal government. Wait the full stretch from 66 to 70, and you can lock in a check that is roughly 32% larger for life, and it keeps getting cost of living raises on top of that bigger number. Now, where did that 8% come from? It's not a gift. It's written into law. Congress created what they named the Delayed Retirement Credit back in the 1972 amendments to the Social Security Act, and they sweetened it in the 1983 amendments, the same law, signed under President Reagan, that slowly pushed the full retirement age up for everyone born after 1954. So the very generation watching me right now, born 51 through 66, got hit by both edges of that same knife. Your finish line got moved back, and the reward for waiting got built into the fine print where most folks never look. I watched a woman, I'll call her Dorothy, because that was close enough to her name, sit down and file at 63 because she was tired and scared. Her monthly check came to about $1,100. Had she waited to 70, that same record would have paid her right around $1,900 a month. That's $800 a month, every month, for the rest of her life. Gone. She never knew. Nobody at that desk was permitted to run both numbers for her out loud and tell her which to pick. So that's the first receipt on the table. The date you claim is worth more than most people's savings account. But knowing that alone isn't enough, because there's a second pot of money most of you don't even know you're standing on, and that one has a name attached to it that ought to make you angry. Let me tell you about the very first person who ever cashed one of these checks. Her name was Ida Mae Fuller, a legal secretary from Ludlow, Vermont. On January 31st, 1940, she received the first Social Security retirement check ever issued in this country. Check number 000000001. The amount was $22.54. Here's the detail that stuck with me. Ida Mae had paid into the system a grand total of $24.75. She lived to be 100 years old, and over those years she collected $22,888. She got back nearly 1,000 times what she put in because she understood something simple. She lived long, and she let the system pay her the whole time it was designed to. Now I bring up Ida Mae for a reason, and it's this. The program was built from day one around the idea that it protects a household, not just a worker. And that's where the second buried pot of money lives, spousal and survivor benefits, and it's where I watched more money quietly evaporate than anywhere else. Here's the situation that doesn't add up. Say a husband worked 40 years and a wife raised the children and worked part-time, or maybe not at all on the books. Most couples I sat with assumed the wife simply had a tiny benefit or none, and that was that. Wrong. Dead wrong. If you are married, and you have been for at least a year, you can be entitled to a spousal benefit worth up to 50% of what your husband or wife earned at their full retirement age, even if you barely paid into the system yourself. 50%. And it does not reduce their check by a single penny. It's a separate stream the law provides, and I sat with couple after couple who had no idea the wife was owed hundreds of dollars a month she was never claiming. Now here is the part that should stop you cold. What happens when one spouse dies? The survivor, the widow, or the widower is entitled to step up to the higher of the two benefits. So if the husband was collecting $1,900 a month and the wife was collecting $900, when he passes, she doesn't keep her $900. She's entitled to move up to his $1,900 for the rest of her life. But, and I need you to hear this only if it's claimed correctly, I watched widows keep collecting their own smaller check for years after their husband died, losing $1,000 a month, because nobody told them the survivor benefit existed and the system did not automatically flip them over to the higher amount. The money was theirs, earned, paid for. And it just sat there unclaimed because a grieving woman didn't know to ask. There's even a divorced spouse version of this. If you were married 10 years or longer and haven't remarried, you can claim on an ex-spouse's record. And here's the kicker, they never even find out. And it takes nothing away from them or their new family. I met a retired school teacher who'd been divorced for 20 years, convinced she was on her own, who was sitting on a spousal benefit worth $600 a month on an ex-husband she hadn't spoken to since the Ford administration. So now you've got two receipts on the table, the date you claim and the household benefits hiding in plain sight. But I can already hear some of you thinking that's fine for folks with a big work history or a wealthy spouse. That's not me. I've got nothing special to work with, and that's exactly the person I want to talk to next. Because the next thing I'm going to show you costs nothing, takes 20 minutes, and you can do it today from the same kitchen table you're probably sitting at right now. I want to talk directly to you, the one who figures none of this applies because you don't have some fat pension or a fancy financial advisor. This next piece is for you specifically, and it's the one I wish somebody had forced my own father to do. Every working American has an earnings record. It's the government's running tally of every dollar you ever earned and paid taxes on, going all the way back to your first job as a teenager. And here is the quiet scandal that record is wrong more often than you'd ever believe. Employers report wages under the wrong number. A company gets bought and payroll records vanish. A woman changes her name after marriage and years of earnings get filed under a name that no longer matches. Every one of those errors shrinks the check you'll get, because your benefit is calculated straight off that record. The Social Security Administration itself has acknowledged this. There's a fund they keep called the Earnings Suspense File wages that came in but couldn't be matched to the right person. Over the years, it has grown into the trillions of dollars in unmatched earnings. Some of that is somebody's missing quarter of work. Some of it might be yours. Here's what you do, and you can do it this afternoon. Go and set up what they call a My Social Security account on the official government website, the one that ends in .gov. Never a copycat. It's free. Once you're in, you can pull up your entire earnings history year by year and your official benefit estimate. Now sit there with a cup of coffee and check it against your own memory. Look for any year that shows 0 when you know you worked. Look for a year that shows far less than you actually made. Especially look at the early years and any year you changed jobs or changed your name. If you find a gap, you can file to correct it, but you need proof. An old W-2, a tax return, a pay stub, even a written statement. This is exactly why the old-timers kept a shoebox of tax papers in the closet. They understood you never throw away the paper that proves what you're owed. I sat with a man who found 3 missing years on his record from a construction outfit that went under in the 1980s. 3 years of solid wages showing as zeros. We got them corrected with his old tax returns, and his monthly benefit went up by roughly $140 for the rest of his life. From 20 minutes of checking and a folder of yellowed paper, that's the whole point of what I'm showing you. You don't need money to fix this. You don't need to be starting over. You need to look at what's already there with your name on it, the record you already built with your own 2 hands over a lifetime of work. And if you want to go even deeper than what I can cover in a single video, I've put the full system in writing. Everything I've laid out here, the claiming strategy, the spousal and survivor rules, the earnings record corrections, and more is documented in my books, Smart Foundations, Deep American, and The Full System. They're written for the person at the kitchen table, not the financial advisor's boardroom. You'll find the links in the description below, and I'd encourage you to take a look before you sit down to file a single form. Now, back to the machine, because once I understood how it actually ran, I couldn't unsee who it was built to protect. And it wasn't you. Let me explain why nobody ever told you any of this. It's not one greedy villain in a back room. It's worse than that, in a way. It's a system designed so that the truth simply never reaches you. When you walk into a Social Security office, or you call that phone line and wait on hold for an hour, the person you finally reach is not permitted to give you advice. That's not me guessing. That is the rule. Their job is to process the claim you bring them. If you walk in and say, "I want to file for my benefit," they file it. They are not there to say, "Wait, ma'am, if you hold off 2 years, you'll get $400 more a month." Or, "Sir, you realize your wife qualifies for a spousal benefit right now?" They process what you ask for. They cannot and will not tell you the smarter path. So the entire burden of knowing lands on you, the one person who was never taught any of it. And the system runs on a quiet assumption that most people will claim early, claim small, and never ask the right questions. Every person who files early out of fear saves the trust fund money. Do the arithmetic on that and tell me who benefits from your ignorance. Then in 2015 it got worse. Congress passed a budget law that year that quietly closed down 2 of the smartest claiming strategies that existed, moves the sharp financial planners had been using for their wealthy clients for years. They called it closing a loophole. What they actually did was pull up the ladder. For a brief window, people born before a certain cutoff could still use a piece of it, a move called the restricted application, where you could collect a spousal benefit for a few years while your own benefit kept growing at that 8% a year. If you were born before January 2nd, 1954, some of you reading the fine print could still catch the tail of that. But notice the pattern. The people who knew the rules kept using them right up until the door shut. The people who didn't know never even realized there was a door. That's the whole story of retirement money in this country laid bare. The knowledge existed. It was real. It was legal. It just never made it down to the kitchen tables of the people who needed it most. And there's one more piece of the machine you have to understand, because it trips up thousands of people every year. It's a rule they named deemed filing. In plain English, it means that for most people, when you file for one benefit at or after a certain point, the government treats you as having filed for everything you're eligible for at the same time. You can no longer pick and choose the smart order the way you once could, which means one wrong move made in the wrong month can permanently lock you into the smaller of two checks. Nobody at that desk is going to warn you before you sign. So that's the villain. Not a face, a design, a system that profits every single time you don't know what you're owed. But knowing all that is only worth something if you can turn it into a real check, so let me lay down the last document, the one I promised you at the start. Here it is, the 6-month rule, the one I've watched put real money, lump sum money into people's hands within weeks of them learning it existed. Most folks think Social Security only pays you starting the month you file, going forward, and never a day before. That's what I believe too. But buried in the claiming rules is a provision for retroactive benefits. If you have already passed your full retirement age when you file, you can request up to 6 months of back payments in a single lump sum money for the months you were eligible but hadn't yet claimed. Let me make that concrete. Say your full retirement age is 66 and a half, and for whatever reason you were busy, you were unsure, you were still working. You didn't get around to filing until 7 or 8 months later. When you finally sit down to file, you can request that lump sum for up to 6 of those months you missed. If your benefit is $2,000 a month, that is a check for up to $12,000 paid to you, often within a matter of weeks. Money you'd otherwise have simply forfeited. Now I have to give you the honest catch, because I'm not here to sell you fairy tales. I'm here to hand you the truth the way I found it. Taking that 6 months of back pay means the government treats you as if you'd filed 6 months earlier, so your ongoing monthly check is figured from that earlier date, which shaves it a little compared to waiting. So this is not free money in every situation. It is a tool, and here is exactly who it's a weapon for. If you are past your full retirement age and you need cash now, a medical bill, a roof, a debt hanging over you, that lump sum is a way to reach back and grab money you were already owed instead of borrowing at interest. And if you filed late anyway, past your full retirement age, and nobody told you about the retroactive option, you may have left thousands sitting on the table without ever knowing you could have asked. I watched a retired mechanic, filing at 67, walk out with a lump sum of just over $11,000 simply because I knew to tell him the words, "I'd like to claim my retroactive benefits." 6 words, $11,000. The clerk would never have offered it. Where did I confirm this? It's not a rumor from a forum. It's spelled out in the Social Security Administration's own rules on retroactive benefits, and it traces right back to the structure of the original Social Security Act and the amendments that followed. The provision has been sitting in the program for decades. It survived every reform. It's real, it's current, and you can ask about it by name the next time you deal with them. And here's how you use everything I've shown you as one plan this weekend at that same kitchen table. First, set up your free account on the .gov site and pull your earnings record hunt for the zeros and the gaps and dig out the old paperwork to fix them. Second, get your real benefit estimate at every age, 62, your full retirement age, and 70, and actually look at the difference that waiting makes. Third, if you're married, divorced after 10 years, or widowed, write down the question in ink. What am I owed on my spouse's record? Because they will not volunteer it. And fourth, if you are already past your full retirement age and you haven't claimed yet, ask about retroactive benefits by name before you sign anything. Do those 4 things and you are no longer the person on the wrong side of that desk. You're the one who walked in already knowing what's yours. Because that's what all of this really comes down to. This was never charity, and it was never a handout. It was your labor, your paychecks, your decades of showing up set aside with your name on it, and then quietly guarded behind rules written so that only the people who already knew would ever collect the full amount. Today, today the paper's in your hands, not theirs. And I think that makes you a certain kind of person. The kind who suspects that a lot of useful, valuable truth gets buried on purpose, not because it's complicated, but because somebody profits every time you don't go looking. If that's you, you're in the right place. So tell me something, and be specific about it. Of everything I laid on the table, which piece hit you hardest? Was it the 8% a year for waiting, the survivor benefit that widows lose by the thousands, or the 6-month lump sum rule most people never hear? Type it in a comment right now and tell me the state you're watching from. I read them, and I want to know how far this reaches. Don't just nod at the screen and click away. Say it, because the folks who comment are the ones who actually go do it. And if you believe, like I do, that this kind of practical American know-how was buried so the rest of us would keep paying and keep quiet, then come along with the people digging it back up. Subscribe and stand with us. Because the next ledger I'm opening is about the Medicare enrollment window. Nobody explains a single missed deadline that can slap a permanent penalty on your health coverage for the rest of your life, and the quiet way to sidestep it that they'll never mail to your mailbox. You earned every bit of this. It's time you collected it. Here's the honest truth. What I showed you was just the overview. Inside the practical ways circle, I take that 6-month rule and apply it straight to your record, step by step. You can ask me your own question. And a real person, me answers you myself. And you're not alone in there. Practical folks like you are already with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen and cancel anytime, one click, no risk,